But this is my mom, the one I lost. Her birthday was April 7th. She turned 93. She lived through Mother's Day, and then she got COVID and passed within 3 days. And so this is her pedigree chart.
Piece by piece, Gigi Bess Richardson has been untangling her family roots.
This was her mother. Her mother died when she was 9 years old, so she was raised by her grandmother. And that was her grandfather. So all the way back. Now,
Gigi and her husband Skip Richardson owned the Richardson African Diaspora Literature Museum and Bookstore in Tampa.
We ended up on the Oprah list for 125 African American bookstores. We ended up on Condé Nast Traveler. We were in the Green Book, which is local.
Gigi, a self-published author, teaches genealogy classes.
I teach it right here, or sometimes out front.
As I worked on this story to find an African American family who traced their enslaved African ancestors back to the Tampa Bay area, I hit quite a few obstacles. Gigi explained why. And it all starts 76 miles northeast of Tampa, in Wildwood, Florida, in the community of Royal, one of Florida's oldest African American communities.
The people there, some of them still own these large plots of land that they got right after emancipation. They were able to hold on to it because some people got theirs, but were not able to hold on because of the laws and, the reversal. So trying to find somebody actually in Tampa, quote unquote Tampa. So the more research I did locally, I found out that some of the larger families here in Tampa brought enslaved people, came from Brooksville. They came at a time when they had, right after emancipation. So it's not that they're not descendants of enslaved people here. It's that what people know about their ancestry.
What African Americans know about their ancestry usually only goes back a few generations. And for African Americans with a family connection in the state of Florida, the search for enslaved ancestors will take some work, a lot of work.
I posted a map of where the blacks was concentrated in 1900.
Vance Lockett lives in Columbus, Ohio, and is one of the admins of the Facebook group I've Traced My Enslaved Ancestors and Their Owners. Now, even though he has no family ties to the Tampa Bay area, as an amateur genealogist, he keeps Florida on his research list.
When you look, Florida was scattered. Florida was kind of unique to the other southern states, so it's going to be hard to find stuff in Florida.
To help me with this story, Vance led me to the book Passages to Freedom, The Underground Railroad in History and Memory. In Chapter 5, Southern Passage, The Forgotten Route to Freedom in Florida, I learned Africans' resistance to slavery started as early as 1526.
That's nearly 300 years before Harriet Tubman helped slaves escape to the north. For 3 centuries, enslaved Africans, mostly from South Carolina and Georgia, sought freedom in St. Augustine, Florida.
Once they arrived, they converted to the Catholic religion, which allowed them to own property, work, and even testify in court. The journey to seek freedom in Florida stopped in 1763, when Spain made a deal with Great Britain. Spain traded Florida for control of Havana, Cuba. After that deal, to avoid becoming slaves again, 100 freed African Americans left St. Augustine for Cuba. In 1818, the First Seminole War caused freed African Americans and Native Americans to leave St. Augustine and seek refuge in West and South Florida. Some of them made their way to hunting villages near Tampa Bay. Another exodus took place in 1821, when Florida became a territory of the United States.
African Americans who wanted guaranteed freedom set sail to Cuba. And as for the others, they took their chances and stayed.
Now, that part of the research is just the tip of the iceberg, and it's necessary, especially for amateur genealogists like Vance. Vance picked up genealogy as a hobby, after a family member shared a little piece of history with him.
My elder cousin Gladys, who's almost 90, you know, about 20 years ago, she gave me a picture of one of our ancestors and said she was enslaved. On the back of the picture, it said Randy. And I was curious. I'm like, I wanted to know this lady and I wanted to know her story. Also, back in 1988, I got in 2 big fights with this guy over a misunderstanding. Come to find out we're cousins. The day after the second fight, my brother, we walked my sister and brother like, that's your cousin. We get to talking and I wanted to know how exactly we was cousins.
In 2004, Vance learned he can trace his family lineage with the help of genealogy software.
So I went to the website, downloaded it, so I started putting my family history on the computer.
And to really dig deep into his family history, Vance realized he needed help.
I started going to the library, researching stuff and doing this. I went to the local Afro-American genealogy place, and there I got a straight up diss. I asked, how can I trace my ancestors and slavers? And they all got up and walked away. I'm like, what? This lit an internal fire on me. I was gonna find these people and I was gonna use the internet. And I did, so I'm a resourceful kind of guy, always kind of been.
Being the resourceful guy that he is, Vance found several people to help him, and he made a pact with one of them.
I started asking questions, and he sat there and said, I'm gonna help you, you help me. He said, your payback to me is you help the next person for free too. They taught me how to do things. And so I started finding stuff. And I found out that one of my third great granddads fought in the Civil War. He got away from his master fought in the war. And he had a 129-page file at the National Archives.
Genealogy tracing is an investment in time and money. And not everyone has an equal balance of both to spare.
If you don't have, you know, the means to easily put food on the table, you're not necessarily thinking about what your ancestors were doing. If you ask a genealogist to do work for you, that costs money. It's expensive. And, you know, sometimes doing the research yourself is even expensive. Even today, you go on and you have to pay for memberships to Ancestry.com, or you have to do, you know, all these things. So there's a price point to knowing your own history. Depending on who you're asking and where you are, it can be anywhere between, you know, $20, $30 an hour up to $100 and some odd dollars an hour, depending on, you know, who you are, who you're working with. And it also depends on how quickly you feel you need the information.
And it also depends on how far back you want to go. A couple of years, decades, centuries? For most African Americans looking for their history, the story stops at 1870. Genealogists, historians, and researchers refer to this obstacle as the 1870 brick wall.
The 1870 United States Federal Census is the first federal census that recorded formerly enslaved individuals by their own name. So prior to this date, it can be very difficult to find a record that might have an enslaved individual's name on it. I have a feeling that a lot of these folks got to 1870 on the census and didn't know where to go from there.
Genealogy companies like Ancestry.com and 23andMe have been helping people connect the dots on family trees since the late 1990s. Some people were able to trace their family line all the way back to the 1600s. But for African Americans, it's not so easy. So to help them get past the 1870 brick wall, faculty members at the University of Maryland launched Enslaved.org, a database that will collect documents of enslaved Africans. To fill the database, Enslaved.org is accepting documents from family historians, genealogy societies, and everyday people who have a piece of history of their enslaved ancestors.
We're particularly interested in historical records of various types of historical records, which were produced in a whole bunch of different places and times, about named enslaved individuals. Slavery and enslavement was very much about imposing names on people and fracturing their lives and their families and stealing their livelihoods and their bodies. It was very much also about enslaved people's living their lives. Enslaved.org is a portal using something called linked open data protocols to be able to discover and identify sources which may exist in a whole bunch of different places, but named individuals But even if it's not about a named individual, even if you don't find a named individual, you might find something about a particular time or a place, people associated with a named individual, or you may never be interested in an individual, you're interested in a particular time and place. And out of that then come to discover, oh, these are the individuals, the people who actually lived in that time and place and experienced what slavery, freedom, and the various kinds of dimensions of that look like at that time and place.
Do you think that you're going to have any challenges extracting the data that's lingering behind the 1870 brick wall?
Oh, sure. There's all kinds of data. There's all kinds of challenges. So it's, it's finding the data, finding the sources, and there are a lot of them. But the totality of sources, some are in very familiar places, in Library of Congress, for instance, National Archives, and then some is held in private collections, private institutions or private homes. And then county clerk offices, that has property records and court records, and so that just the dispersal of the documents. And many of these documents have not been digitized, or they're not, even if they might be available to the public. You have to have a certain kind of ability and a skill set and time, because it takes a lot of time.
So you might be thinking, where do you start? Well, you can start from the beginning. Whatever beginning is accessible to you. Gigi helped her husband Skip trace his roots on his family tree, and the search all started at a funeral. He was grateful to learn the story of his ancestors and how they never gave up on their dream to be free.
It made me feel proud because they came through a tough situation to get to where they got to, living there, coming from Georgia and coming down here and having the land and stuff, and being able to take care of their families like they did and leave them things to help them survive. I feel real proud, and proud of my wife that she did so much research to find that out for me. We all are just happy to be connected with those people. Yeah.
And we found that through a funeral. He lost his half-sister, and when we went to the funeral, people start saying, oh, we know you, we remember you, you're our cousin, so.
That's how it always is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that started the research, and a lot of them didn't know the whole story.